The tragic story of the Richardson family murders shocked the world and shattered the peaceful image of Medicine Hat, Alberta. At the center of this shocking crime was 12-year-old Jasmine Richardson, who became entangled in a forbidden relationship with 23-year-old Jeremy Steinke, a man with a dark past and disturbing obsessions. This is a story of how rebellion can lead to tragic consequences, how manipulation can spiral out of control, and how lives can be tragically cut short. The most horrifying aspect of this case is how easily the dark sides of human nature can surface, and how an outwardly normal life can conceal unseen suffering and chaos. Together, they devised a plan that would lead to the deaths of an entire family, leaving the community shaken, filled with horror and grief. What could have driven a teenager and her much older boyfriend to commit such a gruesome crime? Did what they perceived as love transform into something so destructive? In this tragic case, we will explore what led to the murders, what happened afterward, and the lingering questions for those who remember the Richardson family. Medicine Hat, Alberta, was a quiet town where neighbors greeted each other, children rode their bikes, and weekends were marked by street celebrations and backyard barbecues. It was the kind of place where nothing could go wrong, until 2006, when a crime occurred that shook the entire nation and changed everything. The Richardson family seemed to embody the typical suburban household. The Richardson family was known for their warmth and close bond. Mark Richardson worked in the oil industry. His job was demanding, and he did everything he could to provide for his family, ensuring they had a comfortable life. He was as dedicated to his work as he was to his loved ones. His wife, Deborah Richardson, was a homemaker. Her warm and friendly nature made her well-liked among neighbors and friends. She was actively involved in the lives of her two children, helped at school, and ensured that all their needs were met. The couple's children each brought different elements to the household's atmosphere. Jacob, the younger of the two, was just 8 years old, a cheerful and carefree boy. He loved playing with his friends, enjoyed drawing, and could spend hours watching his favorite cartoons. His innocence and energy filled the Richardson home with laughter and joy. Jacob was the kind of child who could brighten any room with his smile. The family also had a 12-year-old daughter named Jasmine, who was at a different stage in her life, navigating the conflicts of adolescence. Like many teenagers, she was searching for her identity and a sense of independence. Jasmine had always been intelligent and curious. Changes in Jasmine were becoming more noticeable. She gradually became more withdrawn and aggressive, testing boundaries with her parents. Her growing interest in dark clothing, alternative music, and eccentric online communities began to concern Mark and Deborah. At first, they dismissed it as a typical teenage phase, a natural expression of rebellion. But with each passing day, it became increasingly clear that there was something more behind it than just a simple act of defiance. Although they were worried about Jasmine's behavioral changes, the Richardson family remained close. Mark and Deborah worked hard to create a stable and supportive environment for their children, believing that patience and understanding would help bring Jasmine back onto the right path. They set boundaries while also trying to maintain open communication in hopes of bridging the growing gap between them and their daughter. To outsiders, the Richardson family seemed perfect, a model of suburban harmony. Their home was filled with laughter, warmth, and the normal ups and downs of family life. But beneath the surface, tension was slowly building. Jasmine's desire for independence and acts of defiance led to conflicts with her parents, creating a fracture that would ultimately lead to tragic consequences. Jacob's cheerful presence only amplified the innocence of what was about to unfold. His playful spirit and close bond with his family made the Richardson tragedy even more devastating. And how this seemingly ordinary family would become the center of a shocking event that would shake the community and leave the country in disbelief at a truth that barely seemed real. When Jasmine met Jeremy Steinke, a 23-year-old man who, like her, was fascinated by Gothic subculture, their connection was immediate. They met through mutual acquaintances in online forums dedicated to their shared interests. Soon, their bond became so intense that they sought out thrills, drawing each other into the darker aspects of life. What attracted Jasmine to Jeremy was his theatrical persona. Thick black eyeliner, a wardrobe full of black clothing, and his bizarre claim that he was a 300-year-old werewolf made him mysterious, and therefore incredibly appealing to her. Jeremy came from a troubled background, having endured abandonment and relentless bullying. These early experiences shaped his rebellious persona, one that glorified darkness and defied societal norms. To Jasmine, he was enigmatic and exciting, a stark contrast to her structured suburban life. Jasmine's relationship with Jeremy became intense very quickly, despite the significant age gap and his many alarming traits. To Jasmine, Jeremy was more than just a romantic interest. He became her confidant, her partner in rebellion. He listened to her frustrations about her parents, validated her feelings of being misunderstood, and fueled her growing resentment toward them. With each passing day, his influence over her deepened. When Mark and Deborah Richardson discovered their daughter's involvement with Jeremy, they were horrified. The age gap alone was alarming, but even more concerning was Jeremy's behavior and the control he seemed to have over Jasmine. Determined to protect their daughter, they imposed strict rules, forbidding her from seeing Jeremy and closely monitoring her every move. Mark and Deborah hoped these measures would sever the toxic bond and help Jasmine return to a healthier path. But instead, it only widened the divide between them and their daughter. Jasmine, caught in the throes of teenage rebellion, saw her parents as obstacles standing in the way of her happiness. Rather than deterring her, the restrictions only strengthened her attachment to Jeremy. The couple began to develop a dangerous worldview in which Mark and Deborah became enemies, trying to destroy their love and freedom. Jeremy's influence over Jasmine took a darker turn. Feeding off each other's resentment toward her family, their mutual obsession with Gothic themes and rebellion against society morphed into a twisted justification for their growing contempt. They fantasized about a life without the restrictions imposed by Jasmine's home. They were diving into something much darker and more sinister. What started as teenage rebellion had morphed into something far more grim. It was no longer just the uncertain bond between Jasmine and Jeremy. It had become the fuel for a fire that would shake the entire community, leaving a scar on those who knew the Richardson family. Forbidden by Jasmine's parents, the young lovers were forced to rely on secrecy to maintain their connection. Their bond was passionate, a shared act of defiance that intensified in the shadows. Emails, text messages, and instant online chats kept them connected, hidden from parental interference. These secret exchanges became the place where their frustrations and dark fantasies began to take root, slowly evolving into a horrifying nightmare. Jeremy, with his flair for drama and ominous language, combined with Jasmine's rebellious streak, became the catalyst that escalated the situation further. He justified her anger toward her parents, convincing her that they were not standing in their way out of legitimate concern, but out of unjust control. The digital trail they left behind became a terrifying descent into shared delusions, where their conversations began revolving around the idea of eliminating those who stood between them. What started as teenage resentment soon took a sinister turn when their discussions transformed into real plans for murder. One particular message is especially chilling. Allegedly, Jasmine wrote, "I have a plan. It starts with me killing them, and it ends with me living with you." The coldness in her words, the icy tone, left no doubt about her mindset, and instead of discouraging her, Jeremy welcomed the idea with open arms, fully embracing it. He became a willing accomplice, prepared to do whatever it took to stay with her. He boasted about his ability to plan and execute a murder, his words blurring the line between fantasy and intent. Their shared delusion, growing with every message, was fueled by their darkest thoughts. With each passing day, their fantasies evolved, becoming more real with every conversation. Soon, their plans no longer felt like mere ideas. They seemed like an inevitable reality. They discussed methods, timing, and the exact steps they would take to carry out their gruesome scheme. Jeremy remained true to his image. Fascinated by Gothic themes and violence, he armed himself with a knife, a chilling omen of the horror that was about to unfold. For this pair, the murder of Jasmine's family was no longer just a thought. It was a meticulously crafted event they had convinced themselves would finally set them free from parental control. The date was set, April 22, 2006. In their twisted minds, this was supposed to be the beginning of their life together. It was meant to be the night they would carry out the massacre of the Richardson family, thus freeing Jasmine from what she saw as control over her and allowing her to live with Jeremy without interference. Their determination and focus in planning starkly highlighted the immense depths they had plunged into within their shared delusion. As the day approached, the horrifying nature of their intentions became increasingly clear. A relationship that once seemed rooted in typical teenage rebellion had now taken a much darker turn. For the Richardson family, April 22nd was meant to be just another day of suburban life, but instead it became the end of everything they had built together, a tragic downfall tied to unhealthy relationships and delusions. On the night of April 22nd, 2006, the Richardson home was eerily quiet. Inside, Mark and Deborah Richardson were preparing for an ordinary evening, unaware of the horror that was about to unfold. Their once happy home, filled with laughter and the everyday sounds of life, was about to become the site of an unspeakable tragedy. Outside, Jeremy Steinke approached the house with clear intent, armed and resolute. Meanwhile, 12-year-old Jasmine Richardson remained outside, waiting for the horror to begin. Jeremy entered the home with a deadly purpose. His first target was Deborah, the family's matriarch. Realizing the threat, she did everything in her power to protect her family. Her maternal instinct drove her to fight for their safety. The struggle was fierce, but Jeremy was relentless and did not back down. Despite her desperate efforts, Deborah was unable to overcome him, and tragedy became inevitable. The noise alerted Mark, who rushed to help his wife. He found her under attack and attempted to intervene, but Jeremy's assault was so brutal that even Mark's strength and determination could not withstand his fury. He too fell at Jeremy's hands. The loss of both parents in such a horrific manner plunged the Richardson home into chaos and despair. Amidst the terror, 8-year-old Jacob hid in his bed, clutching on to anything that could bring him comfort, terrified and disoriented. The sounds of violence must have been incomprehensible to a child who likely hoped that by staying silent, he would remain safe. But Jeremy showed no mercy. He tracked down Jacob and killed the young boy in an act of such senseless and vicious cruelty that it underscored the sheer depravity of the night. Witnesses and later investigators reported that Jasmine had either actively assisted in, or at the very least, encouraged Jacob's murder at Jeremy's hands. The extent of her involvement added yet another layer of horror to an already unimaginable crime. When the bloodshed ended, the Richardson home had become the site of an unthinkable massacre. The walls and floors were soaked in blood, and an unnatural silence filled the house. The warmth and love that once defined this family home had, in just a few hours, been transformed into a house of horrors. Even seasoned investigators were shaken by the brutality of the crime. After the murders, Jasmine and Jeremy fled, leaving behind the shattered remains of a family. Their actions had stolen 3 lives from those who had every right to continue living. This event also impacted the community's sense of security and normalcy. The Richardson family, once considered a symbol of stability, became a tragic reminder of how quickly everything could change. A night that altered everything, leaving behind unanswered questions and a collective sense of loss that gradually enveloped the neighborhood. By morning, the peace of this quiet area had been shattered. A young boy arrived at the Richardson home to play with his friend Jacob, but no one answered the door. Out of curiosity, he peeked through the window, and what he saw would haunt him forever. Inside the house, he noticed the lifeless bodies of Mark and Deborah. The horrifying scene shocked him to his core, and he immediately called the police. When authorities arrived, they found clear signs of extreme violence. The walls and floors were covered in blood, and the scene bore the marks of the terrible ordeal the family had endured. As investigators searched the house, they discovered the bodies of Mark and Deborah in the living room, while 8-year-old Jacob was found in his bedroom. The brutality of the crime stunned even the most seasoned officers. The disappearance of 12-year-old Jasmine raised immediate concerns that she had been kidnapped. Investigators feared she might be another victim of the horrific events. An alert was issued for her, and authorities began gathering information. However, as the investigation deepened, it became clear that the situation was far more complex. Jasmine's personal belongings were found, including messages she had exchanged with a man named Jeremy Steinke, raising new suspicions. As detectives uncovered more information, including personal conversations between the two, even more disturbing questions emerged. It was becoming increasingly evident that Jasmine was not a victim, but an active participant in the crime. Meanwhile, Jasmine and Jeremy had fled the crime scene, heading to a small town to evade capture. They hid with acquaintances who had no idea what had happened. The people who unknowingly harbored them later reported that the couple behaved as if nothing had occurred. They were photographed laughing, holding hands, and kissing, chilling evidence of their complete detachment from the atrocities they had committed. What was even more disturbing was their total lack of remorse. This fact only further highlighted the twisted dynamic of their relationship. However, their attempt to escape did not last long. Within 24 hours, police, using witness accounts and evidence from the crime scene, tracked down their location. The pair was arrested, bringing their cold-blooded conspiracy to an abrupt end. Jasmine's involvement added another layer to an already inexplicable and shocking tragedy in the eyes of the community. The Richardson murders became a story that continued to captivate and horrify, an incident whose terrifying evidence spoke of how innocence can quickly be consumed by darkness. The trial for the brutal murders of Jasmine's family attracted national attention. It was one of the most disturbing criminal cases in recent decades, sparking debates about the nature of youth involvement in violent crimes and the responsibility of adults in influencing minors. Jasmine, who was only 12 years old at the time of the murders, was tried under the Youth Criminal Justice Act. This law provided her with certain protections due to her age. However, she was still brought to court and judged for her actions, just like any adult, because Jeremy was 23 years old. He was also tried as an adult, and the full weight of the law came down upon him. Prosecutors in the case painted a chilling picture of the twisted relationship between Jasmine and Jeremy, portraying the young girl as not just an active participant in the planning and execution of the murders, but as someone who played a crucial role in making them happen. Prosecutors argued that Jeremy had coldly manipulated Jasmine, using his influence to convince her to go along with the killings of her family members. They claimed that despite her young age, Jasmine was fully aware of the gravity of her actions and bore the same responsibility for the murders as Jeremy. The murders were gruesome in their details, and prosecutors insisted that this was a premeditated act rather than a spontaneous outburst of violence. In contrast, the defense sought to highlight Jasmine's vulnerability as a 12-year-old, arguing that she was easily influenced by an older, more experienced person like Jeremy. They claimed that Jasmine had been brainwashed and coerced into committing the murders, that she did not fully grasp the weight of her actions. The defense portrayed Jeremy as a manipulator who took advantage of Jasmine's naivety and emotional immaturity to gain her trust and use her for his crimes. They urged the court to consider her age and the real possibility that she had been led astray, unable to make her own decisions. As the trial progressed, more evidence emerged against both defendants. Witness testimony, forensic data, and an in-depth examination of the pair's relationship painted a picture of Jeremy's manipulation and control. The defense's argument that Jasmine had been brainwashed failed to convince the jury. Jasmine's involvement in the murders proved to be far more active than just being under someone else's influence. She was a full participant in the planning, execution, and aftermath of the murders, leaving no doubt about her criminal responsibility. In the end, the court delivered its verdict. Jasmine was found guilty on 3 counts of first-degree murder. Despite her young age, it was taken into account during sentencing, but her actions were too severe for a light punishment. She was sentenced to the maximum term for a minor, 10 years in a correctional facility, including 4 years in a psychiatric hospital and 4 years under supervised probation. Meanwhile, Jeremy received the harshest sentence, 3 life terms without the possibility of parole for 25 years. The sentence reflected the horrific nature of the crimes, but it was also tied to the fact that Jeremy was the central figure who had manipulated others into his actions. When Jasmine was released in 2016, she was granted complete anonymity to protect her privacy and help her adjust to life outside the facility. Under a new identity, it is reported that she began a new life, away from the attention that had followed her case for years. Her release marked the end of a legal odyssey that had attracted widespread national attention and sparked debates. For many, her case became an example of rehabilitation and redemption, a chance for change for young offenders in the right circumstances. Her supporters argue that she served her full sentence, including time in a psychiatric hospital, and successfully completed all phases of supervised probation without incident. For them, she is an example of how the justice system can offer a second chance, especially for young people who might have been influenced or otherwise led into committing serious crimes. However, others disagree. Critics believe that giving Jasmine a new identity and a second chance at a normal life does not compensate for the severity of her crimes. They question whether justice has truly been served for the family members who died violently. Her anonymity was seen as a way to avoid responsibility, and critics argue that it sets a dangerous precedent, diminishing the gravity of her actions. This also fuels a broader discussion about juvenile justice, chances for rehabilitation, and how to balance protecting vulnerable offenders with ensuring justice for victims. Her case is frequently cited in debates about the morality and usefulness of punishing minors for serious crimes. While this may be Jasmine's story, it remains Jeremy's as well, as he continues to serve his primary sentence in prison. 3 life sentences without the possibility of parole for 25 years. There is one important difference in Jeremy's case compared to Jasmine's. His identity was never hidden, and as a result, he is often viewed as the aggressor in these tragic events. His role in the crime has been frequently analyzed in an attempt to explain the type of relationship that seemed to spiral uncontrollably into an inexplicable downward spiral. Jeremy's influence on Jasmine, his past, and his motives have become subjects of psychological studies and media analysis. His story will always serve as a reminder of the worst that unchecked manipulation and dysfunctional relationships can lead to when allowed to spiral into incredible acts of violence. For many, Jeremy embodies the dark side of relationships where control and manipulation replace trust and respect. His prolonged incarceration serves as a protective measure to prevent him from harming others. However, his case raises questions about how much more could have been done through mental health interventions and what the society's responsibilities are in preventing such actions before they lead to tragedy. Overall, the case of Jasmine and Jeremy continued to be at the center of public attention and became the subject of social studies on crime, justice, and human behavior. This case highlighted the complexities of criminal justice, especially when minors are involved. It was a shocking reminder of the far-reaching consequences of violence and toxic relationships. The Richardson family murders became a cold reminder of how a life, seemingly normal, can quickly and unexpectedly descend into a tragedy too horrific to imagine. This case, deeply unsettling, forces us to face questions that are not easily answered, pointing to the dark side of love, manipulation, and the fragile nature of human relationships. It raises the question of how dangerous toxic dynamics can be, leading to catastrophic consequences, even in a family that, on the surface, appeared loving and stable. The case of Jasmine Richardson and Jeremy Steinke shook the very foundation of the small town of Medicine Hat in Alberta, and its consequences are still felt today. However, what truly stands out in this case is the particularly brutal nature of the murders and the extreme youth of those involved. Jasmine was only 12 years old at the time. Few cases in Canadian criminal investigations have had such a profound impact. This case exposed the vulnerability of youth to manipulation and raised complex issues of guilt, rehabilitation, and justice. For the people of Medicine Hat, the murders are more than just a sad chapter in their history. It is a ghost that serves as a reminder of how fragile trust can be and how devastating the consequences can be when that trust is broken. Even years later, this case still sparks outrage that extends far beyond the city's borders, shaking everyone who hears about it. The Richardson family murders underscore the complexities of human behavior and the far-reaching consequences of violence for individuals, families, and communities. The Richardson family murders are a stark example of the many complexities of human behavior that can spread through individuals, families, and communities. If you liked my work, please subscribe to the channel and support this video with a like. Let's discuss this story in the comments. Take care of yourselves and your loved ones. Thank you all, and goodbye.